We accept the reality of the world with which we're presented. It's as simple as that.
We no longer live in a world of nations and ideologies, Mr. Beale. The world is a business, Mr. Beale.
Go on without me. Just go.
A good soldier never leaves a man behind.
Because I wouldn't give you 2 cents for all your fancy rules if behind them they didn't have a little bit of plain, ordinary, everyday kindness.
Life, finds a way.
Welcome to Silver Screen Biases. Each week we pick a movie off of IMDb's Top 250 and dig into it. We're examining truth claims in critically acclaimed movies while also examining our own biases. I'm Nelson.
This is Jeff.
And this week we're going to be covering Lawrence of Arabia. From what year was Lawrence of Arabia?
1962. Well, Arabia has always existed, Nelson.
I'm not going to.
And Lawrence, much smaller time frame for Lawrence himself. But,
yeah, he was a World War I figure.
Right.
But the movie's from 1962?
Yes, it was released in 1962. December, I believe, of 1962.
1962. And despite its close... actually, no, I'm mistaken. Due to its close release to A Clockwork Orange, which we haven't discussed. We missed a week or two discussing that movie. Due to its close release to Clockwork Orange, it actually does share some casting.
Yeah.
And I had it looked up. I don't have it pulled up anymore. I spaced that, unfortunately. An extra. Okay. He actually is part of the Arabian Council in the latter half of the movie. He's also a character he's part of the jail security in A Clockwork Orange. As far as like thematic overlap, what comes to mind for you right off the bat? I know you didn't prepare for this.
It's one of my talking points for later on in this episode, but I not specifically Clockwork Orange, but something that I do see as thinking about it right. Similar is this idea of this identity.
Yeah.
I mean,
and that's something that we just keep coming back.
Right. It's true. That's not specific to just these two movies. This is very common in a lot of movies, but Lawrence of Arabia, which we'll get into later, a huge theme of identity within the character of T. Lawrence. And we'll discuss. We'll break.
And also, two very different reactions to the realization that they enjoy violence.
Very much so.
So
you actually see more of a character arc in Lawrence of Arabia than you do in Clockwork, if you, in my opinion. Because I mean, let's just talk about it real quick. T. Lawrence, starting out, he's even quoted in saying, "I don't like violence," and then by the end of it, you see him covered in blood, holding the knife, looking into this reflection on the knife again.
Yeah,
and he's changed. I feel like Alex was his name.
Yep, Alex Dillard.
Yeah, I believe he always was a proponent of violence.
Right.
From when we meet him in the movie.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
We don't see his
childhood,
but we know we assume he's being sexually assaulted. We assume that he's just got some other traumas we're introduced to.
It's hinted anyway.
Yeah. That he's got reason to be violent. But whenever we see Alex, he's already a proponent of it.
Yeah.
So that'd be my take on that.
I don't think I noticed this at the time, and it's kind of a thinly veiled innuendo, so we should have. But he takes a snake out of his drawers.
he exposes a snake.
Yeah.
Out of his drawers.
But we're not here about A Clockwork Orange. We're here about Lawrence of Arabia. But before we even get into Lawrence of Arabia,
yes.
How you doing, Jeff?
Man, doing well. This is exciting. We have broken. So this is episode 26 for us.
Yeah.
So we have covered more than 10% of the top 250.
That's true.
Of the list we have frozen.
Right.
In time. Like obviously it's shifted and we'll talk about that later in a future episode. But
next episode, actually, it's going to become relevant.
Nice. But I'm so proud of us, man. We haven't missed an episode. We've actually added more episodes.
Yeah.
And we're over 10% we're kicking butt, man. So I'm loving this. Even though I did not like this movie. We'll get into that later. But I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah.
And this has been fun. I feel like we're just getting started with this thing. And so I'm feeling good sitting here looking at you, your cute little face. This is nice, man. How about you? How you been, man?
It's weird because as we've discussed, I'm on new medication for assistance with mental health issues, and that break-in period is rough, and it kind of makes me more miserable. So like, let's see, this is the 6th of July, and Hamilton came out on the 4th.
Yes, the episode of Hamilton. Yeah,
and when I finished editing that episode, I was like, man, that episode, it's fine. It's a dud, but it's okay. Mm-hmm. And we launched it, and within 24 hours, I had unsolicited feedback from a few people saying that they really enjoyed it, and that's helpful, but also just kind of weird.
Yeah.
See, I'm in a weird in a weird headspace. Had some incidents where it's like, when it rains, it pours. Yesterday, the air conditioning went out on the van. The not hot water heater. People get squirrely with that. The water heater.
It doesn't heat the hot water?
Stopped heating the hot water. Just let the hot water stay at its temperature.
It's a hot water holder.
Hot water holder. We repaired the water heater, but the AC on the van's still out.
And it was 91 degrees yesterday.
It was 91 degrees yesterday.
Bad day for it to go out.
And I didn't put the windows down because I was just waiting for the AC to kick in. So instead, I was like a puddle of sweat in my van.
Remind me not to sit in the driver's seat.
And then backing out of my driveway, I managed to catch with the front of the van a telephone pole and ripped out a headlight. And it was just one of those things just kept happening. Oh, and then my battery on my phone doesn't hold a charge all day.
Same.
So I got a really great mobile charger. And I keep it charged and charge my phone from it. And then yesterday, it couldn't decide if it was going to take an hour or 10 hours to finish charging my phone. It was just things kept happening. And I had this feeling like things are happening to me. And I got all in my own head about it. But like you, I'm really enjoying this project. I get a lot of enjoyment out of it, watching incredible movies, having conversations with incredible people.
Yeah, it's been really cool.
Yeah, and getting feedback also from we've not discussed feedback on air yet. We've been encouraging feedback, and we've had a little bit.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
A lot of the feedback is just like friends saying,
right.
"Hey, great episode."
Right.
But one of the things we keep saying in our shows is, "Tell us why we're wrong." Jeff and I guess I'm addressing the audience now instead of you directly.
We're so meta.
We have opinions. We have biases. Everybody does. That's part of the point of the show. And we recognize that in a vacuum, when it's just the two of us chatting, or a guest who remarkably seems to align with me politically, even when you've invited them.
Thanks, Brock.
Yeah. He was such a great guest.
That was a good movie.
Such a fun.
See last week's movie.
Where was it going with that point?
Just guests.
But yeah, so when it's just the two or three of us chatting, it's really easy for us to be like, oh, obviously everybody agrees with us because everybody in the room agrees with us. But we want to hear dissenting opinions. One of the greatest parts of the Jaws episode is Tom, real close friend of mine. Him and I just don't agree on much. Mm-hmm. But we really enjoy each other's company. And so it was really great to have dissenting opinions. And we've got some. Some people have been sending us some dissenting opinions. So I want to start with one that we got from Connor. Connor was our guest for Full Metal Jacket. That's right. What was the name of that episode?
Full Metal Jacket. No.
Welcome to the Suck.
Welcome to the Suck. Yeah.
So he comments on Instagram. He commented on our new episode announcement for our Hamilton episode a couple days ago. He said a lot of the founding fathers were in their 30s, which is why it still annoys me that we always elected old men as presidents. Mm. Jefferson called slavery a moral depravity and a hideous blot on the ideals on the new nation. He actually wrote the abolishment of slavery into the Declaration.
Words is hard.
Yeah, and that's not his error, that's mine. Abolishment of slavery into the Declaration, but had to remove it because a lot of the colonies had an economic interest in keeping slavery, and he knew they wouldn't ratify it if he kept that clause in. Now, from our conversation on Braveheart, I think that you and I, Jeff, can both agree that compromising on your values is a moral failing.
Yeah. Yeah.
That said, I think it's important to also recognize that an attempt was made.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you, Connor, for bringing that to our attention. We also have from Mike commenting on our Citizen Kane episode with Zach. That he was a great guest. I hope to have him again in the future. Mm-hmm. Congratulations, by the way, Zach, on your recent marriage, on your nuptials. Yes. Very happy for you. He comments that Kane, he believes, was modeled after William Randolph Hearst of newspaper fame. I asked ChatGPT, hey, was it? And yes, partially, but Citizen Kane or I can't remember his first name. Something, whatever his name is, Kane, was an amalgamation of characters. And some of them were William Randolph Hearst, who was a newspaper magnate, Samuel Insull, Insull, a prominent utilities magnate, Harold McCormick, an executive of the International Harvester Company, and a handful of others. And in fact, I think in that episode we talked about some of the larger-than-life characters of the Industrial Revolution that he kind of evoked imagery of. And the last bit of feedback here, and this one came in today, and I don't believe you've seen it because it came by email.
Email? What's that?
It's short for electronic mail. Similar to electronic females or sex bots. So Joel asked us to not include his last name. So I will not be saying that Joel's last name is. Joel says, Jeff and Nelson, I've been listening to past episodes and really enjoy your podcast. Thank you, Joel. You two have a fun chemistry, and my interest in faith, politics, and movies makes it a highly entertaining show. Thanks, and keep putting these out. We intend to. That said, I have a beef with all three of you on the Full Metal Jacket episode and came here to tell you that you're all wrong about some of the elements in the story or its impact. First, Connor suggested soldiers don't care about the politics of war. They just have a job to do. In my experience, this is way off base. I was in the Army from 2003 to 2009, and there were a lot of strong opinions about the war in Iraq, both pro and con. I knew soldiers who deserted out of a strong moral conviction against the war. I knew a soldier who, after my first deployment, filed as a conscientious objector and was granted an early discharge from the Army. I also knew officers who shared op-eds from neocon writers with their subordinates and encouraged leaders to read them to their troops. There's a lot of apathy in the ranks when it comes to politics, like you might find with civilians who tend to be uninformed or disengaged. But to say that no one has strong views runs completely counter to what I saw. It seems fanciful to think that 1 million service members may be expected to fight and die overseas, and they'd have no subjective opinions about any of it. Second, you're all wrong on the propaganda issue with military partnerships in war films. I appreciate Nelson's visceral opposition to tax funds being used for that purpose, but that's less offensive than the impact of propaganda itself. There was some back and forth between you three related to the impact of Top Gun on Navy recruitment, and certainly there's good reason to think that's problematic. Anecdotally, I saw some of that. In basic training, the drill sergeant asked everyone, how many of you are here because you saw Black Hawk Down and want to be Rangers? Yeah. 1, maybe 2 hands went up in a platoon of 50.
Wow.
But even if more people joined after watching war films, that's still less dangerous than the biased storytelling that the Pentagon's influence has over popular entertainment. Consider the Green Berets, John Wayne's contribution to the war in Vietnam. It was overtly focused on building popular support for the war. It portrays American troops. Let me try that sentence again. It portrays American troops as selfless heroes, literally in the mold of the iconic John Wayne archetype. There are no war crimes portrayed by the good guys. There are only one-dimensional characters with no doubt as to the justice of their cause. At a policy level, there is no criticism or even an antagonist in which to develop contrasting character. It's just a series of vignettes with tortured dialogue to drive home the virtue of the U.S. In more recent years, we have Lone Survivor and 13 Hours, which are very loosely based on actual events. They both ignore inconvenient context and play very loose with the facts, giving audiences an unrealistic perception of the conflicts or the reasons behind them. We also have totally fictionalized stories like Jack Ryan and 24, which lionize the elite forces and make heroes out of intelligence agents, which reinforce the narrative that while sometimes bad actors cause problems, at the core, the institutions they represent are good and deserving of our support and loyalty. Propaganda isn't bad because it leads some young people into the military. It's bad because it reinforces the perspective of the state for the benefit of the state and its political aims. It's not good for a young man who has no life experience or hard lessons to join the army because he saw Black Hawk Down and wants to be a ranger. But it's much worse if that boy's uncle and teacher and pastor, all adults who ought to know better, saw Lone Survivor and uncritically accept the premise that America is the good team, and anywhere it chooses to invade is for a good reason. Thanks again. I appreciate your podcast and look forward to hearing more.
I love that. I mean, my initial reaction is just, I loved it. I just love that we have someone that's invested in us, like, to give that detailed of
Very
response.
thoughtful answer.
I need to read it a couple more times and to break it down and to just digest it. But like, I love this interaction. I thank you for that. What, Joel was his name?
Joel.
Joel, thank you so much, man. Like,
and I emailed Joel a response thanking him for it. Was a very thoughtful response. He clearly took time and he really wanted to make sure. And one of the things I said is a lot of what he had to say there was things that we discussed in the episode,
right?
And a lot gets cuts from our episodes.
Yeah, we have to trim some stuff out.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's just because the point is too muddled.
Yeah,
or it's a good point, but it's in a long, pointless rant. Usually mine. I tend to be much more critical and cut a lot of my own stuff than other people's.
No way.
But I also got his permission before we read this as well. And I also got his permission to share that email with Connor. So Connor actually has a response to Joel, and I'm going to read that now. Connor says, and this is a quote, "I never said soldiers don't have strong political opinions. Most of us can't stand the government. I was simply stating that in situations where bullets are flying, not one single person is worried about what party you subscribe to. That's when it's about the guy to your left and right. That's all that matters. Sure, service members are going to talk during their downtime, being as part of all branches. My point was that Kubrick turned these Marines into caricatures of the way they'd really be acting, and that took me out of the movie. Also, I'd have to go back and listen to my exact wording, but I certainly did not mean to imply that service members don't have a vested interest in the politics of war. The politicians directly determine where we go, and indirectly if our friends live or die. Of course we'd be invested."
I love that. This is
now for my own basis of response to Joel. Like I strongly agree with everything Joel said here. In fact, I was recently having a conversation about the nature of propaganda with a good friend of mine, and I was asserting that propaganda is bad.
Yeah.
And that almost all the wars we've gotten into, with limited exception, we've gotten into because of propaganda. And he's asked, is propaganda bad because it gets us into war? And I hadn't really considered the question of, is propaganda in and of itself bad? So I said to him at the time, I can't say if propaganda is bad, because I haven't really considered it. But propaganda that gets us into war is bad, because these are wars that we wouldn't be in otherwise.
Right.
And loss of life, especially young life, is tragic every time.
Yeah.
And in war, it's often the young men and women that lose their lives and give their lives, often for reasons that they disagree with or don't understand. You know?
Yep.
And in the situation of conscription, oftentimes directly object to. But in taking a little bit more time to kind of like process what propaganda is is dishonest, always. It's a narrativized, either highlighting specific details and downplaying others, sometimes fabricating details, to drive a certain political agenda. And that's dishonest.
Right. I
think that people have a right to the full context when making decisions. And I think that's one of the great advantages of the internet, actually, is that it's really leveled the playing field on access to information.
Yeah. If you want, you have the ability to fact check yourself versus just taking the word of what's being promoted to you on screen or on print or
honestly, I mean, Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter has a lot of faults.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's a lot of things that he's really done poorly, in my opinion. But one of the best things he's done is he's replaced fact checkers with community notes, and just anybody can fact check now. Right. And so we've got like people fact checking the president and saying, hey, you said that we've never defaulted on a loan. That's not true. Here's an article showing all the different times we've defaulted on loans. And that, I think, has been an incredible movement forward in access to information, because you don't have to go look for it now.
Right.
Other people are doing that work for you and saying, hey, here it is right now. You just have, all you have to do is click. And you too can be familiar with the subject matter.
And you too can also prevent forest fires.
Yes.
So
and
just checked. Yeah.
So, Lawrence of Arabia.
Oh, man. Yes, Lawrence of Arabia. First of all, thank you for sharing with that, Nelson. And we hope to do more updates with that in the future. As we get more interaction, we would love for you guys to interact with us. Please, we do not claim to be experts on any of this stuff. We just want to be the start of a discussion.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Joel. Thank you, Connor. Thank you for everyone else who's reached out.
And on YouTube, we have gotten a fair bit of interaction from one particular person, but I'm not going to read any of his stuff because he's actually going to be our guest next week.
Nice.
And so he can come on and speak for himself.
Beautiful. Lawrence of Arabia.
Yeah.
1962. This movie is 3 hours and approximately 38 minutes long, depending on if you count the intermission or not. Directed by David Lean. And the rating of this movie is approved. We've had a couple of these now. Just a couple things about the director, because I wasn't familiar with the name. He's directed Dr. Zhivago, which is a pretty...
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with that movie, but I know I've heard of it.
Yeah.
So I know it's prominent. In Bridge Over River Kwai, which is on the top 250.
Yep.
So I know this name will come up again. Some notable cast in this movie. Peter O'Toole. He voiced a character in Ratatouille. That's the only thing that I've recognized from... Okay, so... When I first saw his name, I tried to connect him to Annette O'Toole, who played in one of the old school Superman movies and then played Martha Kent in the Smallville series.
Yeah.
To my knowledge, they are unrelated.
He is Priam, King of Troy, from the 2004 movie Troy.
See, I've never seen. Yeah, I was unfamiliar with that movie, so it didn't catch my eye. Then the other notable cast member that I recognized was Alec Guinness.
Yeah.
He was also in Dr. Zhivago under. Yep. David Lean's directing, but he's old Ben.
Yeah.
Old Ben Kenobi.
That's true.
Yeah. From a couple Star Wars.
I saw his name in the credits. I know who Alec Guinness is.
Right.
I didn't recognize him in the movie. Who was he in the movie?
He was what's his name? Hold on. Yeah, I know this. He played Prince Faisal.
Oh, really?
Faisal?
He was Prince Faisal?
Faisal, there it is, yes. And
I heard he went west.
You could tell it was his voice. That's Feifel. That was Feifel. You could tell it in his voice. I knew immediately. I could tell it was Obi-Wan playing Prince Faisal. But that's neither here nor there. IMDb, 8.3 out of 10.
I think it's interesting, though, with Alec Guinness, the two characters we know him for are both desert nomads.
Right. Now, Alec was very familiar with this character. And he actually he played T.E. Lawrence in a Broadway or some sort of play performance.
I saw that.
And he wanted it, but at the time of this movie, they were like, "You're too old."
Yeah.
So Guinness was very invested in this film and in the character of T.E. Lawrence.
Now, I know you and I discussed this, and I think it made it into one of our episodes, but I'm not entirely sure.
Probably. In
The Young Adventures of Indiana Jones.
Okay. Yes, I was going to ask you about this because I don't recall. I remember you telling me in like a passing.
Yeah.
So how does this movie cross over with Indiana Jones?
So in The Young Adventures of Indiana Jones, a TV series that you can currently watch on Disney Plus, linked below. In the first episode, we get kind of a montage of sorts of his adolescence. Indiana's, yeah. Or Henry Jones Jr. And in one of the moments of it, it's him meeting famous archaeologist T.E. Lawrence.
Really? It's in just a quick little scene.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that puts Lawrence of Arabia inside the Indiana Jones-averse.
That's not
which
surprising.
is part of the Star Wars-averse.
Right, because of, Obi-Wan.
That's true. No, not because of that, but because in one of the two Indiana Jones, I think, not two, there's 5.
There's 5 now, yeah.
One of the Indiana Jones movies, I think it's the second one, might be the third one. There's a carving on a wall that has R2 and C-3PO.
Yeah. So it's canon, yeah. While we're on it, before I finish stats here, let me bring up my other screen here. In my research for this film, I found out that some other actors have played T.E. Lawrence. It brought up a movie that I'm not familiar with at all, but it brought up an actor I'm very familiar with, Robert Pattinson. In 2015, a movie called Queen of the Desert came out. It's not a well-rated movie, but Robert Pattinson plays T.E. Lawrence. I don't know how much of the movie, if it's just a quick scene, but but this character has come up again, and it is a historical character. So I don't think we've said that yet in this episode, but T. Lawrence is a historical character that existed during this time. This is based.
So is Indiana Jones.
That's not true at all. But yeah, so since we brought up just the universe, this is not the only time that T. Lawrence has been depicted on screen.
Yeah.
However, I've never seen Queen of the Desert. I don't know anything about this movie, so I don't know if it's even in like a characterization type of thing. But yeah, I just thought that was interesting.
Now, as far as historical figures, this is not the first movie we've done about a historical figure. In fact, the last 3 movies we've done have all been about historical figures.
Prove it.
Braveheart,
yes,
which was William Wallace.
Yeah.
Hamilton,
yes,
which was about Alexander Hamilton.
Yeah.
Ford v Ferrari,
yeah,
which was about Shelby and Enzo Ferrari.
Right.
Yeah, Ford and Ferrari. So.
Oh yeah, How to Train Your Dragon was not based on any historical character.
Prove it.
So you're right. So it's just the last.
I don't know if that's the entirety of movies we've done that about historical figures.
I can tell you,
but certainly the last that's an interesting trend over the last several of them.
Into the Wild.
Oh yeah, that's a big one.
Citizen Kane, sort of.
No.
Schindler's List, definitely.
Yes.
Yeah,
that's it.
That is it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Die Hard.
Right. The Christmas biopic.
Mm-hmm. Biopic.
To the grave.
Probably Into the Wild is the movie that we've done so far that's based on a real character that's the closest to a
adaptation
of what really happened. Yeah. Even that is educated guesses from private investigators.
Right.
One trend we've seen with all of these is that it condenses greatly the time frame of events to from several years to just a short time frame.
Mm.
But by all accounts, Lawrence of Arabia is very close to what we know happened, but what we know happened is based off of T.E. Lawrence's own writing.
Right. And he was a very animated character, a person in general, so could he have embellished? Could he have... I mean, history does document the way that the events played out.
Yes.
As far as his specific perspective and his involvement.
It's undeniable.
To quote Hamilton, sometimes we weren't in the room where it happened.
Right.
So, we don't know how some of those interactions... Yeah, so yeah.
It is undeniably true that he was incredibly influential in the Arab Revolt. The degree to which he organized the Arab Revolt, we don't really know.
Right.
Now, I was kind of getting hung up on this a bit. So as you and I discussed earlier, Jeff, I made a strategic error in my day in listening to a 6-hour episode from a history podcast.
Was it intentional about the episode we were filming, or was it just okay? So it wasn't like you were doing research.
Nope.
It was just okay. Strictly pleasure.
But it was just not pleasurable. It was not pleasurable. I mean, it's really well done. It's linked below. But it's about race riots in the 60s, 70s. It was just hard. And I kept waiting for it to turn around and it never did. It's talking about kind of the race war specifically between the Jewish population and the black population in like the 50s and 60s and 70s. And the Jewish population was very liberal, very pro civil rights. And they were trying to help the black population with civil rights issues, but the black people became very resentful of this. While I'm listening to this, I'm thinking about Lawrence of Arabia. And there is a bit of a narrative right now in American culture where we have kind of this idea of like this white knight syndrome, where you've got these affluent white people instructing the minorities on how best to go about navigating a particular situation. We had that a lot in the civil rights movement, where we had affluent, very well-educated, very well-meaning white liberals attempting to help minority populations navigate civil rights issues, and the civil right and then the black leadership is just like, get out of our way. Stop trying to help us. We can do this ourselves. And so thinking about Lawrence of Arabia, that resentment is in this film a bit. But it's not as much as you'd expect.
Right.
And so then my wheels were turning about like, well, what other movies have we seen this in where it's a bit of a reversal of roles? And the only one I could think of, and listeners, if you know of others, please let me know, is 13th Warrior. Have you ever heard of that?
No, I'm familiar with the 12th one, but
okay,
I didn't know it went on to the 13th.
So the 13th Warrior is a really bizarre Antonio Banderas film.
Oh.
Antonio Banderas plays an Arabian prince. So in this film, it opens up with 12 Vikings come to the Saudi prince and say, hey, let's trade. And then they actually ask the Saudi prince to send somebody with them, like on their journey back, because they have these marauders and they need help. So Antonio Banderas playing a Saudi Arabian or an Arabian. I don't know the politically correct. I don't know the way to. No, it's not even about political correctness, but just a respectful way to say this. So, So I apologize if I offend anybody. But he plays an Arabian prince. He goes back with these Vikings, and he is the instrumental thing that turns things around and really helps these Vikings fight off their marauders. So in that regard, it's really a reversal of that trope. I don't even know if that trope is real. It might just be that we're currently being narrativized to believe that there is this trope that's real,
right,
and resent it. I don't know if that's true. But 13th Warrior is the only exception I could think of where it's a very big reversal of roles. And I don't know why I got on that rant.
I loved it.
It's way off course.
It's our podcast. We can do what we want.
It's true.
8.3 out of 10 on the IMDb Top 250. As we record this, it's number 96 in the top 250. And Rotten Tomatoes, the little last of my stats here before we get to budget, 94% tomato meter, 93% audience. So, yeah, the budget. Do you have the budget?
Yes, I do have budget. Before I get to budget, I want to talk a little bit about the history of this on the top 250.
I'll allow it.
So, Lawrence of Arabia came out in 1962, decades before IMDb existed. It has always been in IMDb's top 250. It debuted at 96.
Oh.
No, sorry. It debuted in 1996.
Oh, okay.
It debuted at 26.
Oh, wow.
It then went up to 18 and has slowly slid down. In January 2021, it was down all the way to 115. And it's jumped up since then and has sit around 95, 96 since then. It briefly got below 100, but not for long.
Yeah.
So this movie's been in the top 250 for a very, very long time. And judging by where it sits now, it will continue to be in the top 250 for a very long time.
It'd take a while to knock it off from its longevity here. What you got for the budget?
Estimated $15 million in 1962 dollars. Jeff, take a stab at what percent inflation have we had since 1962?
With my educated experience and all the research I've done, I'm going to say 23%.
23.
Yeah.
You're really close. It's 907%. So that would be $151 million today.
Huh. I need more research. Our writers are still on strike. No,
is that actually still happening?
Yeah, the writer's strike is still going. That's okay. Well, that's not crazy for a movie. This
and I mean, almost all the speaking cast are white men who've been make-upped to look who they're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
But there are exceptions to that. A few of them were overdubbed. I could tell. Just because I assume their accents were too thick to make it. I think the movie at least attempted to be very respectful of Arabian culture.
And according to IMDb, just to cite my source here, this movie has no women in speaking roles.
Oh, thank
it
goodness.
is reportedly the longest movie not to have any dialogue spoken by a woman.
Wow. No wonder it's in the top 250.
Oh, stop it. Stop it. I do not... Nelson does not speak for me.
I believe I speak for both of us when I say
lawyer, please. Wow. So, okay, initial reaction. Do you ever seen this movie before, Nels? Let's talk about the movie now.
I know that my dad, I was 12, and my dad said, "Ooh, Lawrence of Arabia." I think he was like skimming through like movies on cable. It's like, "Ooh, Lawrence of Arabia, this one's great." And as you might expect for a 12-year-old and at a movie this pace, I had no interest.
No.
So I knew that it was based off of a man that actually existed. I knew that he was a British officer that inspired the Arab Revolt. That's really all I knew. In fact, I didn't know if it was World War I or II. And I'm actually so unfamiliar with the subject matter that I don't know why the Turkish Empire was involved in World War I. Like, that's how little I knew about this going in.
Yeah. I knew zero. Honestly, like, when I think of Arabia, I think of like Aladdin and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't know anything about the historical context. I knew nothing about this going in. I looked up the trailer, I think at the end of recording last week's episode, and that was my first introduction to it. So very unfamiliar. And still, even after watching it and watching some YouTube videos and just kind of reading some articles and stuff, like, still very unfamiliar with this time in history, or this puzzle piece of history that was happening during, pre and during World War One. My initial reaction was like, it was very dry.
Yeah.
Like, I know it was a desert. That wasn't even an intended pun, but like, just like, there were some cool shots cinematically, but like, I mean, again, I'm 33 years old. I'm used to modern cinema now. Like, it's not the best thing I've ever seen on screen. And it's definitely not the best acting I've seen on screen. Like, there was nothing about it that set it apart, even as it's dated. And for a 4-hour movie, I felt like it shouldn't have been as choppy as it was. Like, I feel like if you're going to take 4 hours to tell a movie, it should be like, there were some moments where I thought it was just choppy. Like, it just jumped to the next, I struggled. So like, I was underwhelmed with this movie.
And honestly, the movie before the intermission, that could be its own movie. You could end it there. That's a movie.
Yeah.
It's got the whole arc and everything.
Yeah.
Really.
And the intermission is not at the direct center.
No, it's a little past center.
It's essentially the last third.
Also,
the last third of the movie is where the intermission is.
The first 5 minutes of the movie, it's a black screen with music.
Okay, so that was supposed to be there?
Yeah, I thought that there was something wrong with the stream.
I did too.
And so I was on my computer, then I switched to the TV, then I switched to my phone. I was like, oh man, this is like, what's going on with my internet right now? And then I skipped 10 minutes in, and I was like, oh, okay.
I did too.
And then
I went back.
So then you got 5 minutes of just black screen with music, and then you have opening credits. And man, I'm so glad the trend of long opening credit scenes is over. I hate it.
Not for us though. We've still got plenty more movies probably with that trope in there. But yeah, no, I had the exact same reaction at the beginning, the just black screen opening. Was there any things that you did like about the film? Just entertainment value, not even necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, I was really impressed with how sincere an attempt they made to be really respectful of Islamic Arabian culture, nomadic culture. I know that for writers, directors, and film crew who aren't steeped in that culture, that's going to be a hard thing to pull off respectfully.
Yeah.
And not being Arabian, not being Muslim, I don't know how well they did.
Right.
But I can tell that they really tried.
Yeah.
Actually, at one point, when they first start riding camels, the camels have these long tassels at their sides. And I was watching that, I was like, is that a Western conception of what they do, or do they really do that? They really do that. I was like, okay, well, is it cosmetic or is it functional? Because it seems weird to me that a nomadic culture would have anything that wasn't functional.
Yeah.
In fact, throughout the movie, you see their robes being used in functional ways apart from just cosmetic.
Right.
So yeah, apparently the long tassels on the sides of the camels work a lot the same way that horsetails work, where because there's that constant movement, it keeps flies away. So less irritation for the camels, also less disease for the camels. So I thought that was really interesting. I feel like there was a lot of attention paid to detail that they really wanted to get it right.
Right. And it did, the scale of this movie was huge.
Yeah.
I did appreciate the vastness, and they filmed on location.
Mm-hmm.
And there was actually in the 60s. So I got a little note here again, this is from IMDb. The movie spent 2 years in pre-production before the 14 months of shooting took place. So this movie was over a 3-year process.
Mm-hmm.
But they filmed on location in Jordan, Spain, and Morocco.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciated just that. Like even though I wasn't enjoying it cinematically or entertainment-wise, I could see the authenticity of it and the rugged terrain and stuff. Like it was, that was probably my favorite part about it, was the on-site locations.
Yeah, and that's probably where a lot of their budget went.
In all the night scenes, I do know this, again, IMDb, all the night scenes were filmed during the day. It's just a filter over it.
Oh,
so
clever.
Because of all the pitch black darkness in the terrain out there. So I thought that was, it's pretty advanced technology or advanced production for the 60s. So I thought that was cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just overall, I watched this in a matter of 2 days. I had to stop it. I wish I would have known there was intermission though, because I would have tried to make the first watch 2 intermission and then watch the second part. But I split it about at 50% mark, and then I started the next day. I couldn't watch it.
I made it past the intermission, not by a whole lot. I also had to break it into 2 days.
Yeah,
I wanted to watch it all in one go, but I had to leave the last hour for a second day because it's just a lot of movie to digest.
Right. Yeah.
Do you think that you'd be able to do the whole thing in one go if it was like a popcorn film? Like if you're just watching to watch, if you're not doing what we do?
I don't know if this answers your question, but I've already thought about it when I watched this again. And I enjoyed my research about the film post-watching it enough to where I would be intrigued to watch it again, knowing what I know now about that time in history. Again, not so much expecting to fall in love with it or enjoy it entertainmentally wise, but to now understand the story from front to back.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answers your question, but I am interested in watching it again. And I probably won't here.
Yeah.
In the next month or so.
It's a lot of movie to watch again.
Right. And we've got a bunch ahead of us. So I probably won't anytime soon, but I probably will, God willing, before I die. I would like to watch this again now, knowing what I know about the historical events and who he was. I did not know going into this that this was a real historical event.
Okay.
In my mind, this could have been fiction.
Right.
And it wasn't until afterwards that I realized, these are real events. Okay.
If this were a work of fiction, then that White Knight narrative, it is insulting.
Right.
But knowing that this is a real guy that really existed, who, a British man who fell in love with the culture, was instrumental in uniting the Arab nomadic tribes in a revolt against Turkey, who had been dominating them for I think centuries. I'm really not terribly
I'm unfamiliar.
educated on that. Yeah, it really is fascinating. As far as cinematic, artistic stuff, right? And we don't talk about that very often.
Right. This is probably the most we've talked about.
Well, we talked about it a lot with Into the Wild.
That's right.
Because there's a lot of that in there.
Right.
But one thing that I know, kind of really the only thing I noticed with this was we open up with T. Lawrence getting in a motorcycle accident that takes his life. Mm-hmm. And the movie ends with him riding and watching ahead of him a motorcycle.
Fly passes, yeah.
And
I picked up on that.
And I thought that was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I also noticed that I know you said that the acting in this isn't like it didn't impress you, but here's something that I think if you contextualize it might. There's been a big shift in cinema over the decades. Actors act a lot more now.
Right.
As George Lucas said, faster, more energy. And a lot of the acting in this is like micro expressions where you as the audience have to do a bit of work in processing what's happening in this scene. What do they mean by that? There's a lot that isn't said.
Mm-hmm.
That's only on the expression of their face for like a moment, and like that's that, and to a degree, that's impressive acting.
Yeah, there's a lot of
show don't tell.
There's a lot of scenes where there's no dialogue.
Yeah,
and you're just following little bits of action or little facial expressions or reacting to something else.
Yeah,
like, there is a lot of moments where you're going off facial expressions and stuff like. And I will say, like, this movie isn't fresh to me as far as like. I'm not watching it when it first debuted. And so like I'm coming in with my own bias of like films that I'm familiar with, that I'm accustomed to.
Yeah.
So I think that is a lot of the reason that I'm not impressed by this movie, just because like I've had better. To quote Liar Liar Jim Carrey, I've had better. Like there's nothing in this movie outside the scenery that stood out to me. That's like, this is unique. I don't want to I'm not going to sum up my movie yet. We'll wait till the end. But like, I have thoughts about this movie.
Yeah.
As far as like where to go with it. But yeah, just it was dry.
Well, let's talk about some of the claims within the movie about the way the world is.
Mm-hmm.
So T. Lawrence gets sent on a mission to meet Prince Faisal to, quote, find out what kind of man he is. And that's something that we see in a lot of spy. He's an intelligence officer. Yeah. We see that in a lot of kind of like spy and intelligence officer type movies and shows. And I've never really processed that. But the line is kind of bizarre when you think about it. What kind of man he is. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's a matter of the era or if it's because it's a purely like cinematic thing. I don't think about what kind of man people I know are. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a very
like if somebody said to me,
self-aware.
What kind of man is Jeff? I don't know I'd know how to answer that question.
Yeah, I don't know how I would want you to answer that question. He, him, maybe.
Start.
So that's a beginning, I guess. People still do that. Yeah, is a man. I have declared it. If that's what you have to do now, is it a declaration? I think. I'm not sure.
I don't know. I don't want to assume anything.
My gynecologist tells me that it's up to me. So
that's exciting.
Yeah.
Big decisions coming for you.
Yeah. Big stuff. Sorry. Anyways. Yeah. No. Sorry. To continue.
That's really all I had on there. Like I don't even know where I don't know where I'd begin to answer that question. And then thinking about like, well, what kind of man is Prince Faisal? Mm. And then thinking about like that question in other movies and TV shows. I don't know that I've ever heard the question answered.
What do you, specifically talking about the movie, what do you think they were wanting to gain by knowing what type of man he is? Like
political leverage,
military strategy, like, or like,
no.
Okay. Specifically political leverage.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
So, okay. So in his mind, initially, it wasn't even militaristic at that point. It was more governmental than it was.
Yeah, so he's an intelligence officer. He's on loan to the Arab office,
and you see him. He's the first time we meet him off the bike is when he's drawing maps out. So he's laying these foundations of like what they know is terrain and stuff.
Yeah. And so that question of what kind of man is he? I think what they mean by that is how can we use him?
Mm.
What are his vices?
Mm.
What are his virtues?
Ooh.
I think that's what that question means.
Yeah.
How can we turn him into an asset?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, and that kind of goes, if you've got nothing else on that point, like that kind of goes into the thing that I brought up first of all, which is I think the biggest takeaway I took from this was we see in this movie a character arc of someone who had an identity, experienced or went through an event where he was forced to face one of the things that he was against. You see him do it. You see him murder someone or execute someone. Then you see a little later on, he's debriefing about that a moment, and he's like, I liked it. And then by the end of it, you see him just struggling with his identity of like, and not that it all falls on murdering and taking life, but just this idea of like his views on warfare.
Yeah.
His views on do leaders take lives? Do leaders save lives? Like you see him shift in that. For me, like the biggest, like the main character is T. Lawrence. Like it's not like one of those ones where we're following two different stories. Like we're following Lawrence through the whole thing. Like it's his story.
Mm-hmm.
And
although Sharif Ali also has an arc.
Yeah.
And so does Abu. No, not getting his name right.
Abu's the monkey from Aladdin.
The mercenary warlord who, according to what I looked up, he was a more
Adu Abu, Anthony Quinn's character.
Is that right? Adu Abu?
Audaabu.
Oh, I got both those names.
Yeah. Nailed it.
So in the movie, he's portrayed as more of a warlord. According to historic record, he is a more solidified political figure.
Yeah.
But not super relevant to the story. But both Sharif Ali and Adu Abu both have character arcs in this. But they are not the main character. They're supporting cast.
It's this idea of being put up against something that you're strictly against. Like, I wouldn't say this movie is anti-war, but there's definitely, within Lawrence's character, there's reasons to not like war for how it affected him, even if that's not the main message that they're sending.
Yeah.
Because like you do see like Lawrence, he becomes romanticized. Like once he realizes the power that's in taking a life and in showing that sort of power over people, he essentially gets a big head about it. And there's a moment, like especially when that photographer's there and he's in Lawrence on top of the train, and like he's essentially at his peak character.
Yeah,
like you see this how it's I don't want to say corrupted, but I also want to say corrupted at the same time. Like he's not the same person he was at the beginning.
No. And interestingly, that photographer gets disgusted with Lawrence.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that photographer's job is to glorify war to get Americans on board with entering the war. Yeah. That's explicitly his role. And then he says to Lawrence, "Oh, you rotten, bloody man, let me take your rotten, bloody picture for the rotten, bloody newspapers."
Yeah.
So, like, the journalist seems to get disgusted with war, but like his job there is to propagandize Americans into World War I.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that the entrance of the journalist, which was the beginning of the second act after intermission.
He's in the opening scene.
That's right. That
he's talking to the priest.
I forgot about that. I didn't even put that together. That's the one at the beginning. Thank you, Nelson.
He's talking to the priest, then he talks to the journalist.
Yes,
and then we don't see him till after the intermission.
Right. I love that you connected that for me. Yeah. So it's going back to identity. Like I mean, like, and you see. There's just a couple more symbolic moments that I picked up. Like you see earlier on when he's first given that white robe. There's a special name for the robes. I don't have it, but they give him
it means that within the not the Hawatate, because that's Abdu Abu.
Yeah. I think if we're saying
that, Sharif Ali is of a culture of Arabian nomads that. They have each nomadic tribe has their own specific style, but Sharif is basically like count. So they make Lawrence like a chieftain of his own, basically, and that's kind of a plot too. Is like he has no people. He's not Arabian, and they make that clear.
Yeah.
But they treat him like one.
Yeah.
And he's according to the British, he's gone native, but they still treat him British.
Right. And that, yeah, so he's got those robes.
Yeah.
He's dressing as the people he's around. Mm-hmm. And then you see him, he takes his dagger, the nice dagger he's given. Mm-hmm. He looks at his identity in it.
Adjusts his hat.
And he's like, okay, I'm assimilating.
And then he prances around.
Yeah. And there's scenes afterwards where he has this abundance of confidence that comes with it.
Yeah.
And then later on in the middle there, we see him kill a guy. Rick killed a guy. Sorry. It's a great movie.
Yeah, I ate a big red candle.
I love lamp. Anyways. But you just, and then after, okay, they're walking in that village and he's got the garb on and they walk past those military people. And right before he gets tortured, he's like, he's so confident in his stature that he assumes that he won't get noticed as a non-native.
Yeah.
And then he immediately, they send the one guy off because like, yeah, you're a native. And then that whole scene plays out where they take his shirt off, they pinch his skin. They're like, you're pale.
Yeah.
Like, and it's like,
you got blue eyes, you got blonde hair.
And then they assault him. In the book, I believe it's described as that he's sexually assaulted. They don't really visualize that in the movie, but T. Lawrence does allude to some being sexual assault. Or
here's the other thing too. In that scene, I felt like that guy was coming on to him.
He's making eyes, and not in a good way.
And also, so in T. Lawrence's writings, he speaks sympathetically to the struggles of, at the time it was illegal to be gay in England.
Okay.
And so he speaks sympathetically to that struggle of the gay man in England. We do not know what his proclivities were, but there are a lot of people who suspect that he was homosexual.
T. Lawrence.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that Peter O'Toole, intentionally or not, seems to portray him that way. He came off as gay in the film, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly flamboyant and dramatic.
Very charismatic. Like, not saying that these are all specific gay characteristics. Yeah, but you put those all together.
Yeah. Straight men don't have charisma.
Oh.
That's how I know you're gay. So you were talking about he gets tortured by the Turks.
Right. In Lawrence's book, which, do you have the name off the top of your head, the name of his autobiography?
I don't. I know that Lawrence of Arabia was what the media knew him as.
Right. So while you're looking up, T. Lawrence wrote his own autobiography, and he describes in that book sexual assault.
Okay.
But from there, I don't know how much it was elaborate, how much was factual. There's
7 pillars of wisdom.
There it is. Yeah. So, but yeah, and then by the end, and then you see him. After that, then you see him donning these military clothes again, but they don't fit him.
Yeah.
So now he's back in British clothes. It doesn't fit right. He looks out of place there.
Yep.
Then dons the robes again, and then by the end
they beg him to fight.
Yeah.
And then get disgusted when he's a warrior.
Yeah. On one hand, you're sympathetic with Lawrence, and if I can kind of connect this to another movie character, which we may or may not ever talk about, it's definitely not in the top 250, The Hunger Games. Which I believe we've talked about Katniss Everdeen before in an episode.
Yep.
The reason I don't like that book series and movie series, Jennifer Lawrence degrading.
Is because women shouldn't be the main character?
No, her last name is Evergreen, and that's only for trees.
Everdeen,
that's right. Katniss Everdeen.
Are you even a real fan, Jeff?
I'm not. Like, her whole arc, from my perspective, is Katniss's character never made a decision that whole movie, except to volunteer as tribute to save her sister.
Yep.
Everything after that, she's being manipulated. She's being coerced. She's being told what to do. She's become the propaganda. She's not choosing to be the propaganda. She's become the propaganda. And so in some of these moments, I kind of feel like in some moments, Lawrence is that person.
Yeah.
He's being pushed to one thing or another. And whereas he may be enjoying or not enjoying it, he has his natural reactions. There's some situations that he's placed in that are out of his control. So and not all of his decisions do. Some of them he charismatically, he confidently takes. Yeah. But there are some moments where he's put in, whether he wants to or not. And I kind of compare that to Katniss, where she's like, I didn't choose to be a rebel. I didn't choose to start a riot. I didn't choose to start a rebellion. I just want to save my sister. Yeah. Everything after that was not the reason for my decision. Everything after that was because I felt like I had to, like it was my only choice. And I felt like Lawrence had some of those moments.
Yeah.
Point and close.
The only clarification I'd make, you say that she didn't make any decisions, but that's not true.
Well, obviously she made choices.
Yeah, right. So I think it's an important clarification, is that the choices she made did not have her full consent. And that's a clarification with a difference, right? Because she could have chosen another thing that was her full consent, but would have cost her more.
Right.
And that's
there's a couple times like her, her
100%.
choosing to save the dude at the end of the first movie.
Right.
Obviously, but then again, they immediately took that and said, "Okay, we can work with that."
Yeah,
like,
but
you're right. So
and the reason I make that clarification is because it's the same thing with T.E. Lawrence.
Yeah,
he has agency. T.E. Lawrence, the main character of Lawrence of Arabia, the movie that we're talking about right now.
Oh,
he makes decisions.
Right.
There are decisions he chooses where he may have felt like he was trapped,
right,
and had to pick two bad options. And so it might have not been full consent, but that's different than not making a decision.
Right. Okay. No, I agree.
Now, we glossed over it, and I really want to spend a little bit of time with this.
Okay.
This movie discusses race in a way that we haven't touched on yet.
Ooh.
So pinching his skin, he says to Sharif Ali, "This is the stuff that decides what he wants." He being a man, a person. Now, obviously, Lawrence is frustrated here. And in frustration, we often don't say the things that we mean, but we do say the things that we feel, if that makes sense. T.E. Lawrence may not actually agree with the statement, or even the character of T.E. Lawrence in the movie may not agree with the statement, but that is the way he feels when he says it.
Yeah.
So I want to hear what your thoughts on this. This is the stuff that decides what he wants. What does that make you think and feel?
Well, let me process this real quick. So the way I interpret that, open to rebuttal, is obviously the physicality of pointing to his skin, and so what does that mean? Heritage, genetics, socioeconomical class, geographic location, like all these things. Like you can start making these assessments by just the color of your skin and stuff, and you can start to narrow in maybe where or not they're from. And we see it. So and again, this isn't a one size fits all thing. So I think in some instances, I would agree with this. There are some things like we've been talking about that like we are pre-exposed to, we are predisposed to, we are made to fit into this kind of mold, this piece of mold, as far as like whether it is our race, our religion, our demographic, the street we live on, there's things that happen that kind of make us who we are, whether we're intentionally seeking after that or not. So because of those things that happen and because of who we become, we make those choices based on our past, based on our heritage, based on even genetics. I'm starting to make, I don't know if I've said this on air before, but I'm starting to make choices because of my genetics, because my dad has Alzheimer's, and that is a super highly genetically,
as we understand it now,
right?
Yeah.
It can be generational.
Yeah.
And so I'm starting to contemplate things that genetically I'm predisposed to, like whether it's diet, whether it's environment, whether it's how I'm, screen time, just all the big things or small things. I'm starting to try to make these choices that change my potential future.
Specifically with Alzheimer's, the complicated thing with that is how little we know.
Right. So going back to the movie, like I do feel like in some instances, yes, the skin we're in, the face that I have, the past that I have, the 13 years of education that I have that I technically didn't have any control over. I went to school because I was told to, like all those things that I did that I just did. Yeah, I think those are what decides my choices in the future in some instances. But again, that's not one size fits all. I think there are other times where it has nothing to do with where I'm from. This decision is based purely on where I'm going. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know I hope I clarified that well.
So, yes or no, genetics is destiny.
Ooh. That's not that cut and dry. Yes, sir. If I had to lean to one, if you're just asking me yes or no, which you just did, so I don't know why I'm questioning that. No.
Yeah, I would agree.
No.
I think that everything that you've just said is entirely relevant. our upbringing informs our decision making, and it informs our reactions. But reactions and actions are different things.
Mm.
And so, for example, some of the most heroic figures from history are people who, despite their upbringing, despite their situations, chose better things for themselves.
Mm.
But that's action, not reaction.
Yeah.
And we have unimpressive people whose names we don't know because they're not worth knowing from all walks of life, including they had all of the upbringing to prime the pump for greatness. And they chose to react instead of act, and they squandered it all.
Yeah.
So I would agree. Genetics is not destiny. But this statement, this is the stuff that decides what he wants, that is a claim that genetics is destiny.
Yeah. I don't think it's black and white like that. Like,
nice, because of race. Good.
Right? Yeah,
well done.
For sure. Michael Jackson,
both black and white.
Yeah, both black, yeah. But I just, it's never that cut and dry. It's never that simple. It's never
the desert. Yeah.
Right.
And
but like
the knife.
You're on a roll.
It's a Kaiser because of the Germans.
King's Hawaii.
World War One.
King's Hawaii. Yeah, like it's not fully solidified there.
Yeah.
But I mean, I would agree though. I mean, like we do just like, like I'm trying to take in some of the things I'm doing with my life. And so like, I'm trying to make choices that change, that genetic destiny, like obviously like, and then we could even throw in science then too. Cause like, now people can change genetics. Like,
yeah,
but there are some things down to our deep core, like our soul,
mm-hmm.
that I would also constitute as my flesh,
mm-hmm.
like there are some things that like, yeah, I make decisions because of who I am, because who I've been, whether they're right or wrong, I make decisions because of that, and then I learn from it. So hopefully
earlier in this movie, the entire concept of destiny is challenged.
Yeah.
A couple different people say it is written. This is actually one of the actors where the actor clearly is Arabian or Indian or somewhere from that
mm-hmm.
area of the world, and they've overdubbed his voice because you can tell that it's dubbed. It might even still be him in the dub.
Yeah.
Just it's overdubbed. He gets stranded from the group when they're crossing this particularly awful piece of desert. And Lawrence decides to go back to rescue him. And they say the fact that he got separated is proof that he must die. It is written. And he decides to go back and save him anyway. And when he gets back, Sharif Ali says, truly, for some men, nothing is written unless they write it. Then later, when they join up with Abu Abdu, I can't remember.
It's one or the other.
And I feel like getting it wrong almost feels racist. Because it's so...
The listeners know our intention.
Yeah, to be racist.
Again, Nelson does not speak for me.
Later, this character commits a crime where neither Abu or Ali can bring justice because it will offend the other group.
Right.
And so Lawrence brings justice.
This is where you see him take a life.
And he takes a life for the first time. And
as
later,
a neutral third party.
That's right. And later he says that he enjoyed it.
Yeah. And he hated that he enjoyed it.
And he hated that he enjoyed it. But it's the same man whose life he just saved. And Ali says to Abu, this is the man whose life he saved. And Abu says, well, it was written. And I think that's like the first moment in the movie where we're really pivoting towards, well, maybe there is destiny. And then when he's pinching his skin, this is the stuff that decides what he wants. I think Lawrence is at that point frustrated, giving up on the concept of I can make my own destiny. I know that you said early on a big theme of this movie is identity, and I think you're absolutely right. But I think also a big theme of this movie is destiny. Do we actually have agency? Do we get to choose what our life is going to be about? Or is it all reaction?
I would agree with that. And not to be cliche, but like that goes hand in hand, Who we are is where we're trying to go. Not to sound like a fortune
Confucius.
Cookie. When people try to find who they are.
Yeah.
It's usually because they want they want to achieve something that they see as a pinnacle of some sort. I'm being vague because that can mean many different things to many different people.
Yeah.
Like finding our identity,
finding what we're looking for,
right, that ensues a journey, and a journey means that there's a destination. So for us as a Christian, let's talk faith here for a second. My identity is in Christ. And for what that means is like, I know that my future is beyond my specific life and death. My impact goes beyond my life and death, and so my identity equals not just my destiny, but my legacy. And maybe you can interchange destiny and legacy. Maybe those mean different. Okay, you're shaking your head. Like, and I know they mean different things.
Yeah, because destiny is this idea of the things that I will accomplish within my life. And even when I'm making decisions, it's because even when I'm making decisions that I think are pulling me further away from what will be accomplished in my life, it actually ends up pulling me closer to it. Destiny is a lack of agency, whereas legacy is what happens after I die, what I'm remembered for after I die.
Got you. Yeah, you achieve destiny while you're still breathing.
And even not really even achieving it, like it happens regardless of what you do.
Gotcha. But legacy is post-mortem.
Yeah. Like destiny is fate. You don't have a choice.
Right.
But I would agree like that, like those are both like tied up in identity a lot. Now you commented about pursuing what you want, how you leave a legacy.
Right. And
also to some concept of how you achieve your destiny, if there is such a thing as destiny. The British general, or I don't know what his rank is actually, he's asking Prince Faisal, no, not Faisal, Abu, why are you and your men going home? You've looted, and then I think it's really interesting with the looting. He says that even British soldiers get paid. I think that for Western cultures looking at that, that's a bitter pill to swallow. Is that there's not a whole lot of difference here.
Right.
He says, I got what I want, I'm going home. And then he says to him, when you've got what you want, you will go home. The officer says that, no, I won't. That would be like treason. But what the officer doesn't understand is that what he wants is to make the British Empire glorified in his actions. And so he won't go home before that's done.
Right.
Lawrence, what does Lawrence want in this film? Because he says, and Lawrence will go home when he gets what he wants too.
Right.
What does Lawrence want in this film? I think what Lawrence wants, or it's portrayed that Lawrence wants, he wants a free Arabia.
Early Lawrence did. Do you think that was his goal through the whole thing? Because you do see him go through a transformation, but do you think his goal is still the same, even as a different mentality type of person?
Yes, I do think that that's his goal throughout the film. What we see is a self-loathing and disgust at his own bloodlust.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that he still wants a free Arabia. He just no longer thinks that he is suitable to help bring that about.
Right.
What do you think of that line, though? When you've got what you want, you will go home.
Yeah, I mean, well, so if I'm going to a concert, what I want is to be entertained, and when it's done, I'm going to go home. If I'm going to go to a restaurant, I want to get food, I'm going to go home. If I'm going to go to a baseball game, I'm going to watch a baseball game and come home. So it's like, in general, it's a very vague statement. I haven't ate since the last time I ate. Like just something, we talked about that earlier, Nelson. Like, if you look at something like faith, there are some things that don't have a specific ending. Like you and I as Christians, there's not a, we've achieved it. We've conquered, like we've finished Christianity. Like that's not up to you and I. So for us, like, there is no going to church.
With Christianity, it's the inverse. When we go home, we have what we want.
Ooh. Wow. Mic drop. Don't drop it, though. It's a nice mic.
It's a good mic.
Yeah. No, so I don't think it covers everything, every aspect, which, we've already talked about. There's just hard to blanket statement for everything, but
let's try.
That's right. But I just, in general, like, if I've achieved what I want to do, I'm going to go home afterwards.
Right.
I'm not going to stay at the ball field.
Once you're satisfied, you stop trying.
Right.
Another one of those nothing statements, but this one's very common. It was in the last place I looked. Well, yeah,
Right.
because once you found it, you stopped looking. Another 2 here that I really want to go over.
Okay.
3, actually, 3. Lawrence, talking to the Arabian Council, says, if you take English engineers, you'll take English government. And this is a warning.
Yeah. Not specifically the English part, but just you take the engineers, you'll take the government.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As
there are so many people that work behind the scenes. And I lump engineers with like writers, researchers, like anyone that's doing the grunt work for the people that go up to the podium and say would like if you get the people that are working the hardest,
yeah,
the masterminds of all those things, yeah, you take, yeah.
And from my bias, once you concede that you need the American teachers, well, that comes with everything that the American teachers come with. Once you're convinced that you need that the roads the government can provide, well, then you're going to get everything that comes with the government as well. Once you're you pick any one thing that the state provides, and once you've decided that you need the one that they provide, the whole thing comes with it.
Right. Yeah. It's like taking the cornerstone out of something, or like that block that's at the bottom of something that it's holding everything together. Like,
but interestingly, any given stone
right.
can be the cornerstone.
That's true.
In this,
it doesn't have to be the biggest portion of whatever that structure is. Like, you remove it, it's you've ruined. Even if you don't take it all out, you've ruined the stability. Well, so you may not take the government, but you've wounded it.
I would say that that's true. But if we keep with the house parable, any given stone you take out, the building stands. But interestingly, once you put one stone, you're going to put more stones.
Right.
Okay, jump into another quote. This is Ali talking to Abu. If I fear him who love him, then how much more must he fear himself who hates himself? I'm going to restructure that sentence because the grammar is complicated.
Yeah, it's like King James Version.
Yeah. If I, somebody who loves him, fear him, then how much more must he fear himself because he hates himself?
The first part of that,
yeah,
especially in the NKJ version, the Nelson
that's a
King
fear
version,
as respect,
right? Like biblically, we're only supposed to fear God. Like, I don't have the scripture reference memorized, but like, we're supposed to have this reverent fear of God.
Yeah.
Everything else.
Secondary.
Right. Right. So that first part, I'm like, yeah, I'm with it. The second part is where you lost me, because I'm thinking in a spiritual perspective, like, God doesn't fear himself.
But he also doesn't hate himself. It's using two different uses of the word fear. I respect him because I love him, but he's afraid of himself because he hates himself.
Right. So we're definitely not talking about God status.
No.
Okay.
When we're talking about like the fear of the Bible, fear of the Lord, one of the best descriptions I've heard for that is the same way that without having a phobia of fire, you can still have a fear of fire. You respect it. You recognize that it's dangerous.
Right.
And I think that that's the kind of fear here. And, I love him, and I am worried and understand the destructive power he has. How much more aware of his own destructive power must he have if he hates himself?
Right.
I kind of get this here, The things that people come to appreciate about you can almost become your own weapon against yourself.
Right. Oh yeah. I don't really have much more to say that. I agree with that. I guess I do. The more vulnerable you are, the more you expose your true self, whatever you choose to expose, the more you're willing to take on ridicule, judgment. It's exposure therapy. It's just yeah. So, I think that's the more you're transparent, the more people can do whatever they want with that information.
Yeah. Another big quote here. This is Prince Faisal to Lawrence, very late in the film. There's nothing further here for a warrior. We drive bargains, old men's work. Young men make wars, and the virtues of war are the virtues of young men, courage and hope for the future. Then old men make the peace, and the vices of peace are the vices of old men, mistrust and caution. It must be so. So there's actually a lot of claim here.
Yeah.
So let's break down into some component parts.
Specifically, ageism. This category of age does this, and then this one does. Like, I think that's the biggest thing I took away from just you reading it right now. Like, I don't think that, I wouldn't say that's true today.
It's certainly not universally true.
No. Maybe it was during this time, but I can't attest to the age of everyone that was making decisions back then. It's like, I don't know what the statistics are about that to fact check, but like, if you look at our government now, all the prominent people are old. And I would say they're just as war hungry as, well, okay. Okay. Easy, Jeff. Like I would like,
No. Go.
but like, I would say that they are like, sometimes I would get that impression that they're more antagonistic versus defensionistic. Yeah. I made that word up. That's a definition, by the way.
They're more inclined to war than peace.
Right. From my perspective.
I would agree. Yeah.
Maybe I'm a libertarian.
I'll make one of you yet. And every listener at home, I'm coming for you. Take over the world. So
what are we going to do today, Pinky? The same thing we do every day.
Try to make more libertarians. Young men make wars. Agree or disagree?
Yes, but old men also make wars. So I agree with it, but I also don't like. I think every age makes war.
Okay.
Babies make war. I mean, like if you look kids in a daycare, they'll fight over a toy. I mean, I haven't spent much time in a nursing home. If there's one brownie left, I would assume that even geriatric people would fight for a brownie.
Yeah.
I would.
Fast as they moved all week.
That's right.
The virtues of war are courage and hope for the future.
It's not a strict definition, but yeah. I mean, like, the authentic reason for fighting for something is, well, no. Like, I don't fight because I'm courageous. What was that second part?
Hope for the future.
That one, yeah. Like, if I'm going to go up to bat for something, sports reference.
I do love that.
It's going to be because of something, whether it's my future or someone I care about's future. I don't think courage has anything to do with it, because I'm going to do it whether I know I have a chance or not, if there's something worth fighting for.
That's like the definition of courage.
Right, but that's not the motivation.
Okay.
I'm not doing it because of that. That's just a natural outcome. I'm going to do it because of the hope for either my or someone else's future.
So right now I'm working my way through Bob Murphy's book Choice.
Mm.
It is a more approachable modern version of Ludwig von Mises' book Human Action, which was an economic treatise and philosophy book.
Mm.
And Mises makes the argument, and Murphy kind of makes it more easy to digest, that anytime you engage in a purposeful action, it's because you believe that the result of your action will make your future better. Or put another way, hope for the future. If you didn't think it would make your future better, you wouldn't do it. You would just let things happen the way they're happening.
Right.
When Faisal says that this is a virtue of war, I mean, that's just a nature of everything we do. We do things because we think that in doing them will make our situation better. I make a sandwich because I think that having the sandwich will be better than not having the sandwich. Right?
I love sandwich metaphors.
Or, to do what we always do with economics, make it about a lemonade stand. I buy a glass of lemonade because I think that the glass of lemonade will bring me more value than not having it or than having the money in my pocket.
Right.
So I think Faisal's really wrong here when he says that hope for the future is a virtue of war. Like, if hope for the future is just like what people do.
Right.
Then later he says, old men make peace. Vices of peace are mistrust and caution. Do you think that mistrust and caution are vices of peace?
Mistrust and caution. Yeah, I mean, mistrust for sure. I mean, I would be hesitant to say the caution part. Caution is us going, not only protecting our own end or trying to stay out of danger, which is peace. You know, out of danger is peace. So like, I feel like caution sometimes, like there are times where we're too cautious, but I wouldn't say that's the majority. Or maybe you disagree. I mean, it could be from my perspective. It could be, but the first part, yeah, the caution part, I would maybe remove. But
And then I think it's interesting too that they do this poetic distinction of virtue and vice. You know, virtue are things that are good, things that we should aspire to.
right.
And then vices are things that are immoral and that we should be embarrassed of.
Mm-hmm.
A virtue of courage and hope for the future. I mean, I don't think hope for the future is a virtue. I think it's just
Right.
as I've already clarified. Courage, I think, is a virtue. And then vices of mistrust and caution. Mistrust, I can see as a vice. Caution, I don't think is a vice. Caution is a virtue.
I would agree with that. Yeah. So just like we can take things like tobacco, alcohol, sex, entertainment, social media, phones, we can take these things and pervert them into things that are now inappropriate versions of something that is natural, is pure, is innocent.
Yeah.
So caution, I would agree with you, is a virtue. But caution can be perverted, can be misconstrued. It
Into
can be
mistrust.
manipulated into something that's incorrect.
I'm probably not the first person to ever have this observation.
Okay.
All of the things that we listed as could be good things are constructive. They
Right.
build society.
Right.
But when perverted, they become destructive. Hammers can also be both constructive and destructive.
Yeah.
Caution can be constructive, but when it becomes perverted, it becomes mistrust, which is destructive. I think caution is necessary for peace. Mistrust is not. I think mistrust brings war.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great way to interpret that, or rephrase.
Yeah. Digest.
Yeah.
I got one more quote that I really love.
There's this movie. There's a lot of dialogue.
A lot
in
of
this movie.
dialogue.
Yeah.
But if you cut out all the non-dialogue parts, there's about an average amount of dialogue in this movie.
So true.
There may be honor among thieves, but there is none in politicians. I love that line.
Oh, yeah, I have no argument with that.
With limited exception, I would agree with this statement. However, there are politicians who I think that are honorable,
Mhm.
but they're few and far between.
Right.
Do you have quotes from this movie that you'd like to discuss?
Honestly, I didn't even get to quotes. I was looking up. I did not get to the dialogue of this movie. There was so many physical scenes and stuff. I do have some other stuff we can talk about, but there was. I didn't even get to go into the script or looking up specific quotes and stuff. So no, I did not. I do want to say, because this keeps coming up in my notes and I keep looking at it. I just think it's fun. This is completely random. The actor Omar Sharif
Yeah.
played Sheriff Ali.
Yeah.
The character Sheriff Ali.
Sharif.
But yeah, so I loved that, because you kept saying the name. I'm like, wait, you're talking about but it's the same person, the actor. Yeah. Anyways, unrelated. Another thing that I kind of came across, just as a bigger theme in this movie, this idea of allegiance. We saw Lawrence. There was never a point where he was immediately like against the British, but there were times where he was like, I want to represent someone that's more than just where I came from.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But so there was,
very early on.
right. In allegiance,
He calls England a fat country of fat people.
and allegiance can be very much go hand in hand with identity. Like a part of our identity is who do we align ourselves?
Criticism of your own culture does not mean a hatred towards your own culture.
Correct. That was something I did want to separate it from the identity aspect, but there is this, like allegiance part, and not so much just Lawrence with his allegiance to specific groups, but how specific groups react to other people and their allegiances to other groups.
Mm-hmm.
So, and even the photographer, like he kind of came in with his allegiance was just the public eye. He wasn't brought on by the British government. He was just there to
American government. Actually.
Right. It's like, but even then it wasn't because of, it was just for
The Chicago Tribune.
newsstands.
Yeah. Ratings.
Right. To our knowledge, the journalist was not there to find out what kind of man. Well, actually, now that I'm saying it out loud, though, he was sent there to find what kind of man Lawrence was.
He's looking for a story.
Yeah. And that's what Lawrence was set out to do. So yeah. So, I mean, but we see multiple different allegiances in these different characters and stuff. And even within the photographer, you see his allegiance kind of be questioned.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the other big theme that I pulled out of this movie that I wanted to state there. I don't have too much to add to it, but I definitely think that is a bigger theme throughout this movie. Would you say, real quick, would you say this movie is anti-war? There's a lot of negative outcomes from these war depictions, but would you say it's a anti-war and an anti-violence movie?
No.
I agree. There wasn't enough specific commentary on those things. There was some.
I think it tries to have a nuanced opinion on war,
mm-hmm.
and in so doing, basically doesn't have a position on war.
That's fair. Yeah, I would agree with that. And that's pretty much all. That's most of my notes. Then you'd appreciate this, Nelson, and maybe you'll be offended after I tell you this fact. IMDb, just going through some notes that I wanted to make sure it makes the episode. Or while shooting, Peter O'Toole and I.S. Johar riding together on a single camel, Sir David Lean saw that they had trouble staying on the animal. On closer inspection, a large block of hashish was discovered. Both actors were completely stoned. Shooting was abandoned for the whole day.
Have you ever seen Animal House?
No. I'm familiar with it.
There's a scene in Animal House where all of their things are being moved out of the house. And they show up to find out that they're being moved out.
Okay.
John Belushi walks up. He's outraged that they're moving his stuff out. Piece of furniture being moved out. And on top is a bottle of Jim Beam or Jack Daniels or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And he takes it and he drinks it. Now, the director insisted that it be iced tea, but John Belushi insisted, no, it has to be actually whiskey. This was the first shot of the day. He was so incredibly drunk after that they suspended film for the day.
John Belushi. But yeah, so that's pretty much it. That's all I've got outside of our final wrap-up questions. Would you recommend this movie?
I don't know that I would, to be honest.
I wouldn't.
Yeah. I guess I wouldn't.
And this one maybe, and I think I mentioned this back when we talked about It's a Wonderful Life, which I did change my opinion about after watching it a second time.
And discussing it.
Right. I don't get the hype about this, and I'm a little disappointed. As someone who's striving to be a movie buff, I wouldn't say expert. I don't want to be an expert, but I want to be someone who knows movies. I'm a little disappointed that I didn't like it, and it's a revered movie. I feel like, is there something wrong? Did I miss something that makes me not like this because it's so revered and so talked about and so prolific? I'm a little disappointed that I don't like it, but to that end, I don't like it.
Yeah.
It is what it is. I did not enjoy it. And I don't think there's much in it that's worth watching. I'm going to add more to this question with the later questions because I do have opinions about it.
Do you think this story could benefit from a modern retelling?
You're getting to my spoiler for the third question.
Oh, here. Are they working on one?
I'll Google that, but okay. So let's bypass the quick second question. Would you change the rating? It's approved.
No, I approve it.
No, there's the violence is all shown off screen. All executions are shown off screen. Or if they're not, it's just a sword. There's no gore. And then there is blood depicted post and a scene. So
no nudity.
There's no nudity. There's very little language, if any. And it's none of the big ones. No, so even if it, yeah. So it's, so I wouldn't change the rating either. All right. Has it aged well? And this is where I have some thoughts.
No. I think I suspect that for its time, it is incredibly innovative, but that doesn't mean it's aged well. And I don't think it has. Mm. I suspect from other movies from its time, it's aged better. But you've got Arabian men being played by British men. That's just like a political thing where that hasn't aged well.
Yeah.
And then directorial choices that, if you made this movie today, it would be half the length and still all the same content.
Yeah.
So no, I don't think it has aged well.
No, I would agree with that. There's some cool shots, but the stuff that you take away after the 4-hour view is minimal. Just after a quick Google, take it for what it is. It's Google, and I just as we're talking. So there is a movie, or I don't know if it's a movie or if it's like a documentary style, but like there is a something you can view called Lawrence After Arabia that was released in 2021, and it's a trilogy of
sequel about how he went and fought aliens.
Maybe it is more to the story, but I don't know its connection to any, like if it's a direct sequel or if it's just a.
And even if it's historically accurate.
Correct, yes. But there is something that came out in 2021 called Lawrence After Arabia. Look for yourself. And then if I scrolled a little bit further here, there's an article from August 6, 2018, and it says Michael Bay plotting Lawrence of Arabia remake.
Huh.
I did not open the article. It could be complete rubbish.
Sure. Who's the source?
The source is the Pan Arabia Inquirer.
Never heard of it. Doesn't mean
it came up in Google. I Googled Lawrence of Arabia remake. So
yeah, okay.
But here's my thoughts. Here to answer the question. I love history. I think the desert's a cool setting. I think it's a demographic that I don't spend much time with outside of maybe watching Aladdin. Like I don't know much about
Arabian.
Right. Like I would love to see this being remade.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if someone like the dude that's doing Dune? Because, I mean, obviously there's a lot of sand and stuff in Dune, so I just immediately picture some of those scenes. Mm-hmm. That type of cinematic.
Yeah.
I would love to see this remade. And I would go watch it. I'd be excited to see this story retold. I don't have any specific casting I would do, but like I would love to see this story retold. I think the interpretation that it is in currently is not great.
I think I'd cast.
Is this going to be real or is this going to be a joke?
No, I've got you right where I want you, Jeff. You can't tell him I'm about to make a joke nervous. Or not. I'm blanking on his name. The guy that plays Loki in the MCU.
Oh, Tom Hiddleston.
I would cast him for T.E. Lawrence.
Actually?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. He'd be great.
Yeah. I think that would be a terrific film.
Yeah.
And then, as best as possible, get all the Arabian casting to be actually Arabian actors.
I agree with that. Yeah,
mostly because, like we've talked about in the past, actors can play characters that are different races and genders from themselves. I'm fine with that. I get it. But
for the message it's trying to give.
Yeah, if you really want to honor the culture, which I think is a big part of this movie, you should get as many people from that culture to be able to be involved as possible.
Right. No, I agree. So I think we both agree it has not aged well. Last question here. Would this be in your personal top 250? No, not a chance.
No, there's movies that I would recommend that aren't in my personal top 250.
Maybe the remake. If they ever remake it, the remake maybe would make it my top 250. The story's interesting.
Yeah.
There you have it. We did it. 4-hour movie, and we discussed it in 6 hours.
What are we doing next week? Join us next week when we are joined by my friend Steven for Everything, Everywhere, All at Once.
Yeah. You may be watching this right now. Or you did just watch it. Or you'll watch it in the future.
Something that I look forward to discussing next week.
Time travel.
Is that this movie is no longer in the top 250.
Dun, dun, dun.
Join us next week.
Later. Thanks for listening. We had a great time putting this together for you.
To join the conversation, find us on Facebook and Instagram at Silver Screen Biases.
And on Twitter at Screen Biases.
We believe in value for value, so if you found value in our show, we ask you to consider supporting us.
Links to our social media and support can be found in the show notes.